culture plays a huge role in communication. Sometimes when different cultures come together, there could be misunderstandings. Special sensitivity and skills are necessary. A lot of it is reaching out and talking to people, trying to sit down and get their opinions about a certain topic. It's going to help you understand their shared societal values they have, their traits, their morals, their customs. Our street is very similar to the United Nations. We have lots of different nationalities living on it. And so just talking to the neighbors in our case helps us an awful lot to understand anywhere from Afghanistan to Iran to China to Japan to Iran, the aspect of different neighbors, that helps us just getting along and going out to dinner and hanging with them. That really gives us a perspective as to part of their culture and how they interpret things. We have this whole aspect of globalization. There's a growing diversity in the United States population, but also in the ability to outreach digitally across the entire planet. It's a big thing. Social networking, you have to adjust and adopt new attitudes. And there's really what we call 5 dimensions to culture: context, the individualism. Americans are very individualistic, which gives us the real fabulous advantage of being the most innovative nation on planet Earth. But it also makes us look awful rude to an awful lot of other cultures. The time orientation is a big thing, and there's a lot of studies on that. If you ever dive into that, there's actually studies as to how the individual interprets it, but also how other cultures interpret it as well. The power distance as to the rank as to age and positioning. Some people think, I am the boss, you must listen to me and must listen to every word. And you have that aspect, and that doesn't sit well with Americans a lot of times because we all blather out in the process what we feel or think at the moment. Sometimes it doesn't hang well with other cultures. And then the communication style, am I being direct or indirect? And we'll talk about that, how to use the action voice in the process, the active voice, which is really the language of business, is the active voice. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The context, which is one of the 5, it talks about the stimuli, the environment, and what's going on in the aspect of what's happening. North America, a lot of German countries, the Scandinavia, they depend little on the context. High context cultures, China, Japan, and the Middle East, they assume the listener doesn't need much background information because they know what's going on by observing what's happening around them. That's not the case with Americans. So you got to really pay a lot of attention, especially when you're going to a high context culture, or you may miss some important talk. The low context cultures, they prefer direct verbal interaction with each other, and it doesn't matter about the rank. They tend to understand meaning only at one level. They don't see the multiple layers that other societies have, and that really limits their paying attention to what's happening in the context. And they're also not as proficient in reading nonverbal cues as to what's going on, and they value individualization and the individual for them to have something about dignity and respect. So they rely more on logic. They say no more directly. They give authority to written information rather than listen to people. A high context culture, they tend to prefer indirect verbal interaction. Okay, they tend to understand meaning embedded at many social cultural levels. They value group membership. It's a big thing to them. They're more proficient in reading nonverbal cues. They're much more aware as to what's going on in the dynamics of a meeting. They really look and they talk around the point. They avoid offending people because they want to never say no. And they communicate sometimes simple, sometimes ambiguous messages, and they understand visual messages very readily. If you're going to go into the world of international business, you have to take courses that'll give you some good elements, especially if you're an American and never traveled abroad. I think traveling abroad is much better than actually taking a course in the process because you get to learn an awful lot of things. But if you're going to go on a business trip, make certain you have some training or have some experience in the process. Individualization refers to the attitude of independence and freedom from control, where members of high context cultures that really drives everybody crazy. So pay attention to what's going on. Sometimes you have a cultural convergence. One time I had a meeting with some HR people from China, and it was interesting. I was so used to the traditional Chinese aspect of presenting the card with 2 hands, making certain you always put in your shirt pocket next to your heart rather than your wallet to insult them and everything. And so here I had the secretary of a regional Communist Party, a functionary. We were talking along the table, and he's, yeah, give me a call sometime. He takes a business card and he whips it out and he flings it across the table just like an American. I know that he was trying to be a good visitor and fling it to an American. I was just so appalled because I kind of liked the aspect of the formality that I was expecting. But that's a cultural convergence. We actually had a meeting of the minds. He was acting American and I was trying to act Chinese. And it really was funny watching the crossing of the two in the meeting, and we actually enjoyed each other's company quite a bit. So sometimes you can really have a lot of fun by sitting down there and paying attention to what's going on, especially if you research a little bit beforehand. It helps an awful lot. Here you have two different aspects of time that the book is involved with. It talks about a monochromatic time or a polychromatic time as you go through. So it depends what you're looking at, abundant and nonlinear. You'll see people perception of time and how they do it really is an unlimited resource, and you'll see that happening a lot with South Asian, South American, Asian, and Native American. They really have time and they're open and flexible, where a lot of Western cultures tend to be very direct and blunt and wanting to move specifically in a process. You have the power distance aspects about how societies cope with inequality. It's a big thing. You have high power distance countries. There's formal hierarchies, very formal paternalistic power relationships, always respect the elders. Then the low power, where you have everybody get to speak, everybody's democratic, which makes the high power distance countries flip out because of the fact that it's so American and so crude, because we're disrespectful in that process. You really got to watch what you're doing in the process. So look at the communication style. A lot of North Americans are uncomfortable with silence and impatient with delays, and they're blunt about it, saying, let's get going. And they're kind of crude in the process, when sometimes a delay or a pause in silence is actually a healthy thing and helps overall get everybody to get along. Social media blurs boundaries. You better believe it. Too many people put everything positive on social media and don't tell the truth about what is really happening. So everybody assumes the whole world is fabulous, and they're the ones that are frustrated when that simply isn't true. It reduces hierarchies. People that have opinions about everything, but no research and no knowledge about it, they have an opinion. They think their opinion is good as somebody else's who's been in it for their whole life. So you have that aspect of it. And even though we're closer together with social media, the data shows that we're more lonely than ever before. Talk about an odd thing. We're closer together with social media, but we're further apart with social media. Okay, so that's it. So is it global or local? You have this cultural convergence, but you also have a more confusion and more knowledge about stuff. And sometimes the knowledge isn't good, it's almost chaotic. If you're going to immerse yourself in another culture, pay attention to who they are. It really is very interesting. Social media, is it something local? Is it something global? That really helps a lot. I'm on a page with 500 people whose last name is Bugay. Bugay is very common in the Philippines. So I have roots out there, and one fellow Bugay says, how come you have my last name? I says, because I was born with it. I says, actually, I'm European, and we have a group in the Philippines and a group in Turkey, of all things, that all have the same last name, but I'm not Turkish, I'm kind of French. Okay, so we had this big dialogue and everything else, and it took a while for him to calm down that I had stolen his last name. And it's still your last name. I had it. I was born with it. I'll blame my mom and dad over it. So it's interesting. This digital nationalism is very interesting. So pay attention to the culture, values, traits, morals, and customs of other things. The high context cultures versus the low context is a big deal. And if you're going to ever visit another country, especially on business, and you have business that's going to be profitable or unprofitable based upon what you know or don't know about a meeting coming up, I recommend you have immerse yourself into some cultural training to help you make sure you communicate well, but always listen. That's going to help you be successful in culture and communication. Take care.